grateful to the organizers, Dr. Anwarul Haq and Muqdad, to give me this honor to be here today to interact with this highly educated audience. Although I must admit in the beginning that I am not highly educated. I'm just a student of literature, of Persian classical poetry and of history, especially Indian history and Central Asian history and partly Turkish history. And I'm reminded of an interesting anecdote which I'll narrate in the beginning, that there was a crowd on the bank of a river for a picnic they were enjoying. All of a sudden a child fell in the water. There was a hue and cry, who would rescue the child? Suddenly a gentleman, he jumped into the river. The child got hold of him. The gentleman dragged him to the bank. Then the audience gathered and they all praised him and congratulated him. Oh, you have done a great job. You have rescued the child. You have rescued a human life. So everybody showered praises on him, and then they asked him to say something to the audience, and he said, okay, first tell me who gave me the push and who threw me into the water. So, gentlemen, it is Dr. Anwarul Haq and my friend, my host, Mr. Nisar and Muqdad. They are throwing me into the water. I did not volunteer to save the child. I must say at the outset that my talk will not be conventional. I would not use the abstract, physical, metaphysical and philosophical terminology which normally lulls an audience to sleep, drowsiness, and lures the audience to yawning. My idea of Rumi's philosophy and Iqbal's poetry would be slightly unconventional and different. Some parts of my conversation may not be very palatable and very sweet to the audience, especially to the Muslim audience. I'll be very curt and I'll be very down to the earth. I'll not be abstract. I'll not take you to the mysticism of caves and mountains. And I'll not take you to the seminaries and monasteries. I'll drag you to a mysticism which is there in the mid of the world. It is in the market, it is in the house, it is in the business, it is in the schools, and it is what is drastically and entirely different from an unfortunate version of the mysticism to which Muslims are indulged deeply these days. I'm sorry, my emphasis would be slightly more on Rumi and Iqbal with reference to Muslims, but I am sure that those who are not Muslims, they would learn lessons from what's the plight of my brethren today. I'll start with something which happened in Australia a couple of years back. In the Parliament of New South Wales, an Australian politician, he brought a bill which meant to ban the Muslim veil, the covering of the face, burqa. This bill was defeated by the majority of the Australian legislators. It was not passed. The attempt to ban the covering of the face like what happened a couple of years back, you might be knowing, in France. It failed. Still, there was a reaction among the Australian Muslims. In Sydney, the biggest Muslim pocket, the biggest concentration is a locality which is called Lakimba. There was a gathering of Muslims there, especially of women. They spoke vehemently against the Australian designs. Am I clear? Is everybody following me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, my accent is not very updated. I speak in my own accent, but I hope I can be followed, but everybody, and you are with me, I hope we are on the same page. The thrust of the audience was on the fact that Australian way of life is not fit for Muslims. It's a decadent way of life. We cannot tolerate it. And the game which has started with presentation of the bill, which presently is defeated, might lead to something which may not be very tolerable for Muslims in future. The Australians reacted. This reaction was logical. They said that, okay, if Australian way of life is decadent, then you leave. We did not go to any Muslim country to invite Muslims, which are in a very large number in Australia. I am moved by the speeches of the people who stressed there that this way of life doesn't suit Muslims and it's a decadent way of life. So I decide to leave Australia. Where should I go? I look around. I decide that Saudi Arabia is the best place for a Muslim to go there. So I ask my family to pack up. We leave Australia, we re-migrate to Saudi Arabia, but then I am told I can't. My daughter cannot drive there. I will not get a visa very easily. I will be discriminated because I am not an Arab. I am a Pakistani, and also, although the credit goes to misdeeds of the Pakistanis, but still, those Pakistanis who did not indulge in any misdeeds, they are also treated very badly. Okay, I can't go to Saudi Arabia, then I decide to migrate to UAE. I'll start my business there, but I am told that I can't do anything there because there is a law of kafala, of guarantee. I must have a guarantor. It's a sort of slavery. Whatever I earn, the half of which goes to my guarantor. And I can't get any property, any business, any shop, any taxi registered on my own name. So I can't go to UAE. To save myself from the decadent way of life, I now decide to go back to Pakistan, which is supposed to be the only nuclear country. But then I am told that I will not be safe there. There people are killing each other. There is a lot of terrorism. There is a Afghan border. There are fundamentalists. Then there are secular pockets. There are daggers drawn, and they have always been locking their heads against each other. Where would I go? There are 55 Muslim countries in the world, and I conclude after a lot of research that I cannot migrate to a single Muslim country. There are many reasons. I need a very progressive education for my kids. I can't have in those countries. I want democratic values to be seen and to be experienced by my kids, which are not there. Out of 55, only 4, perhaps 3 Muslim countries, they are having democracy: Malaysia, Turkey, and partly Pakistan and partly Iran. I need basic human rights, which I may not have in most of those countries. For 35 or 40 million Muslims presently have migrated to the countries which, according to us, are suffering from a decadent way of life. Can we give them a way of life which is not decadent? We don't have democracy in most of us, in most of the countries. We don't have basic human rights. The universities across the Muslim world, I think not more than half dozen universities are counted among the 500 top universities of the world. There are embargoes on business, on speech. And there are monarchies. There is law and order situation. The women in most of these 55 Muslim countries, they are illiterate. I am told that the total number of books translated in these 55 countries during last 10 years is much less than the number of books translated, for instance, in Spain during last 1 year. So it is here that I need Rumi and Iqbal. I approach them to come to my rescue. I understand that we all know the life histories of Rumi and Iqbal. Rumi was born in 1207. And there are two things similar in the lives of Iqbal and Rumi. When Rumi was growing up, there was a horrible Mongol onslaught throughout the Muslim world. They started with the Khwarezm and Central Asia, and they devastated the entire Middle East, and they went up to Syria and Asia Minor, including southern Iraq, called Mesopotamia in those days. When Iqbal was growing up, there was much more than this. The conditions of Muslim was much worse. Iqbal, who was born at the end of 19th century, he witnessed a colossal and massive downfall of Muslims. Not only physical and military downfall, it was intellectual downfall. It was a downfall in education, in industry. When Iqbal grew up, 400 years before that, Muslims had stopped inventing anything. No life-saving drugs, no inventions, no scientific objects were invented. Then there is another thing common between Rumi and Iqbal, and that is Persian. I don't know how many of us here know Persian and how many of us can realize the value of the Persian. But Persian had been the single biggest tool of communication among the Muslim world after Arabic. And if I assert that it surpassed Arabic, it exceeded Arabic in communicating and interacting with the Muslims, I might not be that wrong. Persian as a tool of communication, as a medium of expression, was common between Rumi and Iqbal. Rumi was born in present-day Mazar Sharif, Balkh, which is not Persian speaking, it is Turkish speaking. the accent is Uzbek. And from there, because of the Mongol onslaught and because of the restlessness in the Muslim world, they traveled very vastly and traversing the entire Middle East. They went to Turkey and then they settled in the present eastern part of Turkey, which is called Anatolia these days, and perhaps in those days it was called Erzurum. Hence, Jalaluddin is called Rumi, although he is called Maulvi in Iran. But in India and Pakistan, he has been named as Maulana Rumi. He did not have anything to do with Rome of Italy, because the eastern part of Turkey had been named in that portion of history as Erzurum. The Persian underwent a tragedy throughout the world in 18th and then in 19th century. In 18th century, the British imperialism, they changed Persian in India into English, whereas the Persian had been the state language, has been the language of literature and culture in India for last 500 years. It is very unfortunate that if you ask a Pakistani scholar or a Pakistani student today that when did your literature start, he would start with 18th century from the birth of Urdu. The 500 years of Persian literature in India, I'm not talking of Iran, they have simply disappeared, they have vanished into thin air because of one British act of changing state language overnight from from Persian to Urdu. And all scholars in the Indian subcontinent overnight became illiterate because next day they had to run here and there to get letters issued by the Indian government written into English, translated into a language which they could understand. The transformation by English from Persian into English by the British government was a very well calculated move. It was not just to arrange their daily administrative matters in India. It was a move to isolate Indian Muslims from their past, from their legacy, from their inheritance, from their literature, from their civilization, from their culture, and from whatever they have. Overnight, the Indian Muslims in the subcontinent, after giving up Persian, they were without any dress, they were naked, they were poor. And this is one fact which perhaps motivated Iqbal to make Persian a language of his poetry much more than Urdu. His 3.5 books are written in Urdu and his 9 books have been written in Persian, although he knew that Persian in those days was not the major language which could be understood, grasped by majority of the Indian Muslims. A simultaneous tragedy happened in Central Asia and in Turkey 100 years after what happened in India, which I narrated just now. Am I being followed?
Yes.
Are we on the same page?
Yes.
The Central Asia, the present 6 republics, you know better than I know, they were not there before the Russian descended southward. It took almost 300 years for Russia to come down to Central Asia and then to conquer these countries. In 1860, they conquered Tashkent. Before that, they had already conquered Khiva. And they did, after occupying the entire Central Asia, they did something more clever than English. English in the subcontinent, the British imperialism in the subcontinent, did away with the language. Russian imperialism in the Central Asia, they did not do away with the language, they did away with the script. In early 1920s, we all know that Bolsheviks, Lenin, they promised with the Central Asians that you fight along with us to subdue Tsar, and when Tsar is defeated, we would give you freedom. And Anwar Pasha, he migrated from Turkey. He led a war of independence in Central Asia, and as promised by Bolsheviks, he favored Bolsheviks to defeat Tsar and their forces. But as it happens, might is right, Anwar Pasha should have realized that this would not happen, and Central Asian Muslims should have realized that nobody gives independence to you on a plate. So when Bolsheviks had assimilated their power and Tsar was finally done away with, they went back on their words, and Anwar Pasha, somewhere between Chinese border and present Tajikistan, he was killed. In early 1920s, they changed the script of entire Central Asian languages, Turkish and Persian, into Cyrillic, into Russian script. This happened in early 20s. And they intended to achieve the same goal with their peers down south in the subcontinent were trying to achieve by replacing Persian with English. By changing script, you lose everything because the language does not remain the same. The poetry loses its meter. The prose loses its shiningness. Then, fortunately or unfortunately, this is not our topic. We can dilate on it in a separate gathering why Ataturk did it. Ataturk changed the script of today Turkey from Persian and Arabic into Latin. We all know it. And when Bolsheviks, when they realized that, the Russians initially changed the script of Central Asia into Latin, not Cyrillic. When Ataturk changed the script of Turkey from Arabic and Persian into Latin, the Bolsheviks or the Soviet Union realized that now Turkey would have an interaction with the Central Asian Muslims, and this is what they didn't want. So they rechanged the script from Latin to Cyrillic in the late 20s. And simultaneously of Persian, which was spoken in present-day Tajikistan and in parts of Uzbekistan, especially the two big towns which are called towns in museum or museums in town, Samarkand and Bukhara, and in part of Khujan, which previously used to be called Leninabad. Same happened with Turkish, because the Turkic accents which are spoken in Central Asia, they are basically Turkish language. So overnight, they also were changed into the strange scripts. And you would be astonished to know that Turkish and Persian are the only languages in the world today which are being written in more than 2 or 3 scripts, and the people who speak Persian and Turkey, they cannot interact with each other on paper. Turkey is being written in Central Asia in Cyrillic. Turkey is being written in Istanbul in Latin, and Turkey is being written in North Afghanistan, which is called Turkestan-e-Saghir, the minor Turkestan, in Arabic and Persian. So look at the plight. A Turk who is from Uzbekistan, he goes to Turkey, he can converse in Turkish with a Turk, but he can't read what he writes. And a Turkish from Afghanistan, he goes to Central Asia, he can converse, but he can't read and he can't write. And same is the case with Persian. A Persian speaking person from Tajikistan, from Samarkand, from Bukhara, from Khujan, from Tashkent, he goes to Iran, or he goes to Mazar Sharif or Kunduz. He can converse very easily, but he can't read a single word and he can't write, he can't communicate with them. So, it is here that we go to Rumi and Iqbal, that what's the use of your mysticism when 55 Muslim countries in the world today, they are counted nowhere, they stand nowhere. Their economy is shattered, their culture is looked down upon, their industry is practically, it doesn't exist, because you import whatever you need from other countries and you don't have much to export. Iqbal knew that the Muslim world in those days, and unfortunately in the today's world also, is split between two groups. One group says that we would wear turban, we would sit in the mosque, we would shun modernism, we would not study technology. And the other group, they say, okay, we hate mosque, we don't have anything to do with religion, with religious literature, with religious background, and we want only to educate ourselves in the modern technology. So, Iqbal asked these questions to his mentor Rumi. In books of Iqbal, Iqbal poses himself as Indian disciple, Murid-e Hindi. And he calls Rumi Pir-e-Rumi. Pir in Persian means an old man, but in Urdu it means a spiritual leader. In Bali Jibreel, I don't need this book. I'm just hinting at that these are complete works of Iqbal, and Bali Jibreel is one of the books in Urdu. Iqbal has written a very long dialogue with Rumi. He asks, the pattern is that he asks questions and he brings answers from the literature of the Rumi, and the dialogue is of this shape, that the Indian disciple puts a question and Rumi, who is his mentor, his spiritual leader, he replies. So it's a very long poem. I've briefed it, and I'll just present with the background which I have narrated. Some portions of it I'll narrate, so that we are clear that the two groups into which unfortunately the present Muslim world is split. What solution Iqbal asks from Rumi and what solution Rumi gives? Which of these groups, the turban group and the non-turban groups, which group is upheld by them? Iqbal asks, Chashme Bina se hai jari juए खूं, ilme hazir se hai deen zaro zubun. Well, this is Urdu. How many of us know Persian? Can I know? I was told that some friends would be from Uzbekistan. Okay, I'll translate Urdu as well as Persian. The question of the question of Iqbal is that the wise eye is bleeding with pain because the knowledge of this age has put my faith, Iqbal's faith, into danger. The present day knowledge, Iqbal says, has put my faith into danger. What should I do? Rumi replies, Ilm ra bar tanzani mare babad, ilm ra bar dilzani yare babad. You fling knowledge on the body, it becomes serpent, snake. You strike knowledge on your body, it becomes snake. But you strike knowledge on your spirit, on your soul, on your heart, it becomes friend. So what Rumi has told is that the knowledge should not pertain only to physique, to the physical factors. It should do a lot with the heart and with the soul. Then again Iqbal puts a question to Rumi, पढ़ लिए मैंने रूमे शर को गर्द रूह में बाकी है अब तक दर्द कर. That Iqbal says, I've mastered all the sciences of East and West, but still my heart, my soul, my spirit is undergoing the agony, the pain. What should I do? And Rumi replies, Dastina harna al bimarat kunad sue madar akati marat kunad. Rumi says, you are sick. And unfortunately, you are being treated by the people who do not know about your illness and they don't have any sympathy with you. You better come to your mother because she is the only person who can look after you. By this, Rumi means that knowledge which pertains to you, to your own civilization, to your own culture, to your own background, so that you do away with the agonies and the pains you have. Then Iqbal puts another question, a very difficult question. Oriental eyes of East, is highly impressed by West, by Western standards, by Western civilization, and who are the ladies which are promised to pious Muslims in the paradise. And Western Hoor is preferred by Muslims, preferred to Hoors of paradise, which they are supposed to get. Then Rumi replies that this highly impressive Western civilization is like silver. Silver shines and silver is white, but if you keep in your pocket or in your clothes, then your clothes, they become black. It blackens you. Then the final question which Iqbal puts about the two groups which are there in the Muslim world, Karobare Khusravi ya Rahibi kya hai aakhir ghayat-e Deen Nabi, he asks Rumi, what is the ultimate aim of path of the Prophet Muhammad? What is the ultimate aim? What does he want? There are two options for us, and Iqbal narrates, asserts, spells out those two options. Business of world, or sitting in a cave, sitting in a seminary, sitting in a monastery. What should I do? What should I choose between these two worlds? And Rumi replies, and the most unfortunate aspect is that this reply of Rumi is never disclosed by the Muslim scholars of today throughout the Muslim world. They feel a lot of inferiority complex by saying this. Rumi says that rice in my creed is power and magnificence. Rise in my creed is power, and rise in others' creed is cave and seminary. Muslims, they don't have anything to do by sitting in the caves and seminaries. They have to work to get power. They have to work, they have to struggle to get knowledge. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the crux of the dialogue, of which only a portion I have rendered. And at the end of my this stray talk, I'll just recite one poem of Iqbal, which is very important in view of the situation of the Muslim world, which I venture to draw in front of you. Iqbal says, Quwwat-e Maghrib naz chango rawab, naz raqse dukhtarane behajab. The rise of the West, rise of Europe and rise of America is not because of the music which they like, and it is not because their women, they are not covered, not because of the modernism, not because of the dress code which Western world is following these days. The rise of the West is not because of their music and because of their culture and because of the fashion or of the state in which their ladies are spending their life. Rise of the West, which all of us are witnessing, is not because their women are beautiful, their cheeks are red, or their legs are naked, or they have very beautiful hairstyles. Rise of the West is not because they are secular or they have separated church and state into two different sections. And rise of West is not because of Latin script. Then Iqbal says, then if rise of West is not because of these things, then what's the reason? What's the power behind rise of West? Iqbal says that rise of West, power of West, is only because of knowledge and technology. And this is the only oil which is lightening their hurricanes, their bulbs. Hikmat al-Qato Buride Jaman East, Mane Maman East, and then he says very clearly, shunning the inferiority complex which most of the Muslims have, that wisdom and rise does not depend on the cuts of the dresses and on the designs. And then he says that turban does not prevent you from seeking knowledge and from holding power. Ilmu fanra hai jawane shoh shang maghz mi bayid na malbu se frang. If you want wisdom, if you want knowledge, if you want power, then it needs brain. It does not need Western dress. Then andarira jis nigah matloob nees, teen kula ya aan kula matloob nees. The problem is not that I should wear this dress or that dress. I should put on this turban or that hat or this cap. The problem is that insight is needed to get power and to get wisdom. Insight of knowledge, of heart, of mind. And fikre chalaki agar dari basas, tabe darraki agar dari basas, you need high IQ and you need high thinking. And then he says, Bulke mana kas hade ura na bas beje hade pehme na badas. The country of the meaning, country of the literature, country of the knowledge country of science and technology has no limits, and nobody gets this country without continuous struggle. With this I end. I don't know whether my thoughts were coherent or not, but I thought it better to be in the present day world rather than taking you to an abstract mysticism of which also I could speak. But I think I did my choice in a better way. Thank you very much.